Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the Hungry Athlete Podcast, now known as the Share the Road Podcast. With me today, I have Lyle Jackson, one of the coaches of the Mattapan football team. He's leading his team actually to the national championships in Florida, and so this is a longtime friend of mine. He was actually a coach of mine as well, and I've seen a lot of his journey through coaching and just helping out the youth, and I want to highlight that, and I want to share the road with you. So, Lyle, how you doing today? Good afternoon, actually.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. I'm doing well, thanks.
I just want to go right into it, man. Let's talk a little bit about the your experience with the 14U team that you're working with in football. How did you start working with this team? Were these kids with you this entire time, or is this something very new to you?
Yeah, great question. So, definitely want to take the time to highlight Mattapan Patriots youth football and cheerleading organization. I've been with the organization since
Mhm.
2017. I started off as a coach. The organization and a lot of youth football is volunteer based. So I've been volunteering with the organization. Started as a coach, uh, grew into a board member role, and now I serve as the vice president of the Mattapan Patriots organization. So I'm just really at this point of the season so proud of our 14U squad. We had at this point in the season we have about 28 youth going down ages 13 and 14 going down to Florida where they've qualified for the national championship tournament, and we're in the planning process of making sure they have everything that they need to go down. They fought through a tough season all season long with a great 6-1 record in the regular season, becoming the number one
Mhm.
seed locally, and then moving on to becoming the King of 617 conference champions. Then moving on to the regional tournaments where they won their regional semifinal game and qualified to move down. So I'm not actually a coach for that squad, but as a board member and vice president, extremely proud of that coaching staff, those families, those youth that have participated all season long, through the hot days since July 24th all the way to now.
Mhm.
Um, Everyone has endured through the weather and tough situations and tough competition in our journey where it's our first ever year in AYF, American Youth Football,
Yeah.
as we transition
Mhm.
from Pop Warner. And so this is a historic year for us, and I'm extremely excited to talk more about them, um, because
Could
it's
you
been a
describe
great
the
season
difference
so far.
between my apology, not to cut you off, but could you explain the difference between an AYF team and a Pop Warner team?
Essentially, they're different national affiliations, right? So it's a
Gotcha.
national governing body, so to speak. And so we're just partnered under the AYF umbrella where they have, regional level, national level, local, state level, conferences based off of communities, things of that nature, and leagues. So it's very similar. However, at the this past year, we did a lot of talking amongst our organization and felt that there were just certain things that AYF offered differently that
Hmm.
we wanted to make that shift from Pop Warner into AYF to provide the best platform and opportunities for our young people.
Yes. Yesterday or not yesterday, earlier you had mentioned that you were part of the board members for the Mattapan Patriots. So, how do you feel your experience as a board member has affected your coaching? Also, do you feel like it's enhanced your coaching? Do you feel like it's one thing? It's another part of the job, or talk to me about the difference between being a board member and being a coach.
Well, this that's a great question. This is going to be a completely shameless plug for our youth.
Mhm.
Being a coach has come natural to me as a former player, former athlete, and now in a role where I consider myself a teacher. So I've always kind of catered and geared towards that side of my passion. Those being a coach, I'm just emulating what I got from my mentors as a youth. However,
Got it.
being a board member, I've had to pick up different skills and trades and experience in areas like fundraising. So when I say
Mm,
shameless plug, in order for our 14U to get down to Florida, there's a huge price tag on it. We have to cover the expenses of the flight down, the hotels or the stay that we have for our accommodations down there, making sure the kids have food so that they're, not starving down there while they're away.
yeah.
and making sure we can coordinate transportation for them and proper chaperones to make sure they have the right support. So we've been pushing things like the GoFundMe campaign and numerous fundraising campaigns that in a coaching role that might not necessarily be a necessity for me or a responsibility for me,
Mm-hmm.
but as a board member, things like that, networking, really engaging in the community. Being a board member has so many different facets to it.
Yeah.
Just financial management, like I said, networking, building those relationships in the community, making sure we have the right support, the fundraising piece, um, and some of those things you get kind of support and shown the ropes, and some of those things you get thrown into the fire and you have to learn as you go. Because, like I said, I've been involved in sports my whole life, so it was almost a seamless transition for me to go from player to coach, but
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that really prepared me or a guidebook, handbook for what it takes to be a board member. So I think a lot of those managerial and behind the scenes things, um, that actually kind of goes back to my upbringing and my educational career while I was at Dean College and Springfield College studying sports management. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost, I wear multiple hats, but I feel like I'm always, compounding one hat on top of the other hat on top of the other hat
Yeah.
at all times, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
it looks like, oh yeah, coach does everything, but really and truly I might be in board member mode, right? Or
Gotcha.
I might be in coach mode, but I have to kind of step outside because I also coach the 8U team. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's primarily second and third graders. And so while we pushed very deep into the season, we lost. We were 9-0 and lost in the New England Regional Championship game. So I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of with my
It's still
coach hat
impressive.
on, but then
Yeah.
ultimately, as our 14U advanced, I had to shift gears and put my board member hat on. So it is
Mm-hmm.
two different things, but a lot of it ties into one around sports, especially around community and our youth. And so I'd like to think that I wear both at all times and wear them well.
Mm-hmm. No, you definitely do, man. And I want to go back to the point. I know you mentioned your time at Dean College. I definitely want to go back to that point. But if there's anything that whether the 8U team had taught you or the 14U had taught you, what do you feel like is one big lesson that being a coach for whether it's a because you've been there for a little bit and the teams and the programs really progressed over the years. What's like one or two things that the students the kids themselves are teaching you?
Man, I think the biggest thing that keeps me going is always considering myself a student. Every step of the way, I feel like I've learned
Mm,
something from just my time as a youth, teenager, young adult. I've had the blessing of being able to learn from so many individuals, coaches, mentors, former bosses, um,
mm,
supervisors, advisors, you name it. Whatever the title, it didn't really matter. I feel like I'm able to learn from everybody, and so I always try to consider myself a student because from my time going through being a participant and shifting gears, picking up volunteer positions or part-time jobs where I may be a sports instructor or a coach, to then becoming a high
mm-hmm.
school coach, to then really diving into coaching in the youth world where I was never able to play Pop Warner as a kid because I was too big. And back then they had weight limits, right? So my
Gotcha. Yeah.
first introduction was as a coach and a volunteer, and it was a whole new world to me.
Mm,
And so really and truly, even in that time frame that I've been with Mattapan Patriots since 2017 to now, I had a group of kids that I followed from the time they were all 8, 9, 10, 11 until they moved up into what we called the 12U, the 12 and under age group. And
got it.
so those kids were all 11, 12. They might have turned 13 after the age deadline. Um, but being with that group that first round right before COVID hit, the pandemic hit, and kind of learning on that journey with different players joining us, some players leaving us, the coaching staff looking different from year to year, and then kind of having round two right now, where
Mm,
this is my third year that I just wrapped up with my group. I started with them as 5 and 6 year olds on what we call 6U, right? I think when you played
yeah.
Mattapan Patriots, it was called F Team, right? And so now
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
we're in a position where I've had this group for the second time around, and so I'm blessed to have kind of like a trial and error, so to speak, so much experience. And
Mm,
now I have I'm making informed decisions because I know what works, I know what doesn't work, and I have so much support around me and guidance. Even my coaching staff, they're phenomenal and come from all different walks of life. And so when I don't know something or when I'm unsure about something, I have people to lean on, and that's been a blessing because really and truly, like I said, it's that's what keeps me going. Every practice, every
Yeah.
meeting, every game, there's something to learn from and move forward, and that's always the challenge. And one of the things that I even try to instill, we as a coaching staff and the culture of our team with our children, our third graders, really, is, I think we heard this at the NFL level with the New England Patriots, is like do your job or one game at a time. And
Yep.
we were kind of using that metaphor
Mm-hmm.
of like, hey, you guys have lofty goals, because when we at the beginning of the season talked to them about goal setting and what they want to do, they were talking about championships and winning in Florida. That didn't come from the coaches. And so we were like,
Nice.
okay, in order to get
Mm-hmm.
there, we have to get to the top floor, so to speak. And every practice and every day is one step, and every game every week is the next level. So we made it up through the season through various steps and various levels, and getting them to understand that those different things about just like having goals and planning and life skills, those are the things that I try to pride myself on having myself, but then
Mm-hmm.
also instilling in these young people, because it's such a important and valuable skill to be able to have just that sense or semblance of organization and structure,
Mm-hmm.
because we know how much things can get thrown at us. And so to be able to be calm or still or just in an put together in a
Yeah.
chaotic environment is
Mm-hmm.
just so key to being able to either make it through it or thrive, you know.
Yeah. No, I definitely I can empathize with that because I know each week could be different. You can have kids injured, you can have kids sick. You got to deal with your parents also, especially being a board member. So that's something even in my experience as a swim coach, it was much different being just the coach, and then it was different working with setting up the meets and then getting the kids sign up for the meets. And so I can definitely empathize with that part of the process. Um,
Yep.
we're jumping around a little bit right now with the questions because you're bringing up a whole lot of good things. And I kind of want to go into how we met first. And just a little bit for the podcast. I met I met Coach Lyle as my coach, so he was initially my coach. He was a good football coach to us. We definitely gave him a hard time when we was there, but I feel like those experiences especially made him an even greater coach now, through the good and the bad. And so can you talk a little bit about how your experience as a coach, a volunteer coach at John D. O'Brien, even added to your experience now at Mattapan, or how it was different?
Yeah. Yeah, I have great relationships with the current coaching staff there. You know that they've been there for the better part of the last, what, 2 decades, since about
Decades, yeah,
2003, right? So, and I
yeah.
give them crap about it now in my role as a BPS, Boston Public Schools regional athletic
Mm-hmm.
coordinator. I see those guys all the time, and I tell them like, man, you guys have really been around for 20 years, and I say that
Mm-hmm.
to say, I was part of one of the earlier waves that they had as a player. I
Yep.
started playing, for those who don't know, John D. O'Brien is a 7 through 12 Boston Public School, known as an exam school in Boston
Mm-hmm.
Public School system. And I started in the 7th grade, didn't start playing sports until the 8th grade. And I joined the football team, and I was able to continue my playing career um, until I was a senior and graduating. And those relationships, honestly, built with those coaches, that was huge for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having those role models and father figures, that's something I very much needed when I was a young person. And so those relationships carried with me. So when I had some time in between my schooling in college, where I came home to Boston, it was a no brainer. It was
Yep.
like, yes, I want to coach. I kind of got my feet wet when I was in school doing various practicums, internships, part term jobs. And so when I came home, it was like, oh, coaching high school? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely. And
Yep.
so being a part of that coaching staff, I was blessed to join. I believe my first year was 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that I officially walked away in 2018 or 2019. During that time span, I had gone back to college to finish my bachelor's degree, my undergraduate, and
Mm-hmm.
so there were some years where I was more engaged than others. And
Yep.
with that time span, man, to really be a part of that, because when I was a student, we were kind of on the up and up where we had some tough years, but we went deep in the playoffs. I want to say 2 years while I was there. The first
Yep.
time making it into a state Super Bowl game and unfortunately losing. And then the second time was our senior year where we were, I want to say 10-0, and we lost to a tough Manchester Essex team the uh, game before the state
Mm-hmm.
championship. So finishing off our senior year 10-1, and then kind of the years after, it was kind of like competitive, but it was a slow decline: 10-1, 9-2, 8-3, but
Mm-hmm.
still
Yeah.
one of the best programs in the city. Joining that staff again as a coach, and then being able to be on the coaching side of it, and we made our own runs, right, where we were Boston City League North or South champs. I forget which division or region, but we a
Yeah.
couple years while
City
I was
champs
there,
for
I
like
think it
one or
was,
two seasons.
yeah, 2013, and then I believe 2016, we had a couple runs where, we were one of the best teams in the city and
Mm-hmm.
made runs in the playoffs. And that was great to be on that side of things too. Um, yeah, being able to shift gears. And it's funny because I would definitely look at those guys as my coaches and mentors, right?
Yep.
But then you kind of sometimes liken somebody to being like your big cousin or your uncle,
Yeah.
or,
Uncle.
right?
Yeah.
And for a lot of you guys, I was those guys are a lot older, but at the time where I was coaching you guys, I was in my mid 20s, so I
Mm-hmm.
was just trying to be big brother, right? I was just trying
Yeah.
to be like, hey, I've been in your shoes before. I know what the old man said. Just do what he says, and then let's
Yeah.
have a conversation over here. And this is how you should deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you have certain expectations and responsibilities. We have certain systems in place, and so I kind of felt like when I was coaching at the O'Brien of like, I'm your advisor, right? Yes, I
Yeah.
happen to be a
That's what it
position
felt
coach.
like, honestly.
A lot of times I was coaching the quarterbacks or helping up with the receivers or helping up with the defensive line.
Mhm.
But then also there was a year or two where I was the co-offensive coordinator. And
Yep.
so everybody knows the head coach and the coordinators, but I just, you know, being the youngest coach on that staff and one of the newest and least experienced, was able to step into that role because they
Mm-hmm.
valued my contributions, but then also my relationships with you guys, right? And
Yeah.
so I very much consider myself, um, everybody has it, right? Everybody gets to that point where, and I'm not saying this about this group of coaches, but you have to have that connection, right? And when you have coaches that may be from a different generation, 20, 30 years older, sometimes there can
Yeah.
be a disconnect, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, coach is just doing stuff because he's stuck in his old ways or something like that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like being able to bridge that gap. I think for a couple of years, I really do think that I was able to kind of serve as the glue, and really bridge that gap between the coaches that have been there
Mm-hmm.
and your wave of players while I was there. So I appreciated my time there because it allowed me to be an assistant, right? Be an assistant and be in a system. And I think a lot of times with young coaches want to immediately be a coordinator or immediately want that head coaching role. And I've been in positions, whether it be John D. O'Brien or even my time at Catholic Memorial a couple of seasons
Mm-hmm.
ago and being Massachusetts Division II state champs, I was an assistant. I was in a role where I was coaching a specific position group, and I was always in charge of just one function
Yep.
that contributed to the main piece, the whole piece, the main team, right? So I think that being able to learn how to do my job and teach
Yep.
my guys to do their job and how it contributes to the whole part, um, that was valuable experience for me, and I'm glad that I was able to take that experience and kind of graduate, so to speak, onto taking on larger roles in coaching since then.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how my experience there as a young 20 something has lent into the last couple of years, and then even being on the administrative side of things, because I think even at O'Brien, even as a player, we always saw Coach Gatson doing all the paperwork and the this and the that and
Yep.
making sure our physicals are good. And so now that I'm having to do that with Youth Pop Warner and now AYF Youth Football, it's like I have the binders, I got to make sure the physicals are
Hmm.
good, birth
You have the
certificate,
vision. You can
got to
see
make
it.
sure all the consent forms are good, and
Hmm.
organize the practice schedules and things of that nature. So yeah, I'm blessed because I feel like every step of the way I've been on a path, and whether that path has kind of been a winding road, or even if I've ever gotten off path and got back on, I feel like everything I've been through has
Yep.
contributed to everywhere I am, to where I am now, and
Hmm.
everything that I'm capable of doing and contributing to now. So I think it's all relevant, and I think it's all been helpful, and I'm so glad um, to 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 have been through everything that I've been through, coaching on the field and off.
Yeah, man. And talking about roads, I actually want to take a little bit of a not a left turn, but shift the lane just a little bit because I know you had spoke about
Yes.
in that time of you working from John D. O'Brien to Catholic Memorial, and even when you was working at the YMCA, which we'll bring up later on. You talking about you finishing your bachelor's degree, and I want to congratulate you on that because I didn't even know you had finished it during that time. But what was the catalyst
Yes.
that really got you to really be like, you know what? I do want to finish this, and I do want to make sure that I get this education. What do you feel like were the the catalyst that got you to complete that?
Man, that's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that, but I got chills right now thinking about that question. And that answer really and truly is um, I set goals for myself, right? They always
Gotcha.
tell us, like, they always ask us what we aspire to be. Like, what do you want to be when you
Hmm.
grow up, right? And at a certain point, especially in high school at John D. O'Brien, it's crazy because I wrote, I want to say, 3 college admissions letters on the impact that playing video games had on me wanting to pursue a college degree. And that might
Hmm.
sound absurd at first, but when I was in high school and I was a teenager, I was playing a lot of Madden, right?
Yep.
But the part of Madden that I loved was the franchise mode. It
My
wasn't
player.
playing
Yep.
the games or creating players, it was creating stadiums and being a GM and drafting players, signing them, trading them, doing various things. And so the way my brain was working back then,
Hmm.
I was so attached on wanting to work at the professional level on the operations side of things for a professional sports organization. And so when I went to school, really and truly, there was nothing that was going to stop me. But if I can be transparent, the things that got me off track were just not having the foundation that I need, not having
Got it.
certain structures that I needed to make sure that I was on top of my schoolwork, or if I needed support, what I needed to do. And so, you know, I got off path for a while. I had to take some time away. It was about 5 semesters, almost three full years. Um, and one of the biggest things, just kind of with sticking to my dreams and pushing it and never losing sight of that, one of the biggest things was valuing myself, but then also seeing how a lot of my peers were getting opportunities that I wasn't. And I
Yes.
never made any excuses for that. It was just, okay, I'm not on the same timeline as them, right? So
Hmm.
growing up in Boston and going to Boston public schools, a lot of things for me was public transportation.
Yep.
No one ever put it in my brain, oh, hey, you should go get your license. Hey, you should get a car, right? And so getting out to these campuses, Dean Colleges in Franklin, Mass, which is off the commuter rail, right?
Yep.
Again, public transportation. And then Springfield College, a lot of times I would come home, whether it be on the Greyhound or whatever the case may be. But a lot of times it was either taking that Greyhound or staying on campus, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yep.
when it came to opportunities like internships, jobs, whatever the case may be, um, a lot of my peers, a lot of my classmates, friends, they were securing things. They
Yep.
were at the Mass Mutual Center. They were working for, at the time, I think it was the Springfield Falcons or the Springfield Thunderbirds, which was a AHL, American Hockey League team, right? and also the Basketball Hall of Fame was out there in Springfield.
Yep.
And so
Hmm.
I'm looking left and looking right, and I'm seeing what my peers are doing. And I never necessarily got jealous, but I said, man, if they can do it, I can do it too.
Hmm.
I just need to buckle down, or I just need to kind of figure out what it is that I want or what my path is, and then I got to get on. So when I had to take that time off and come home
Nice.
and do my schooling, I was working Salvation Army Croc Center, community center in Boston. I was working at TD Garden, doing various roles from security to being an usher and guest hospitality and relations.
Hmm.
I was working at the YMCA part time, a couple basketball classes every weekend, and then I was volunteering at O'Brien. So a lot of people didn't know that I was juggling all these things, but really and truly, when I got home, I said, I'm saving money to get a car.
Yep.
And when I get this car, I'm getting back into school. And when I get back into school, I'm finishing everything I need because I want this degree, and I still aspire to be working at some organization in the operational side of leadership that in relation to either working with the community,
Yep.
working with youth, or working in sports. Right. So that was kind of my motivation. I never lost sight of that. And yeah, yeah, man. It
No,
was
I.
it was an interesting time in my life, and I'm glad that I made it through. And I very much value those experiences.
Hmm. No, that's really good to hear, and it sounded like you really persevered even through all those different goals. Whether it was getting the car, getting back on campus, securing the different jobs, securing the money. Like I know it's not easy out here, especially. So, even hearing that is something really inspiring, honestly. So, thank you for sharing that. We're back. Um, Back to the conversation of kind of well, let's move on to that. Basically, you were talking about things that your friends were doing, and you were seeing their successes, or quote unquote successes, basically. Can you describe a little bit about something at that age that you used to value that you don't value anymore, or a new value that you have installed in yourself that you've grown to appreciate more? Or if I can ask that in a better way, anything you valued back then that you don't value now?
Yeah. People who know me know I'm a little headstrong. Um, and so being a young person, unfortunately, my father passed when I was very young. And so I would consider that, even though I have great support systems with my family, I do feel like a lot of things I had to find out for myself. And
Yes.
so just figuring out for myself just what paths I wanted to walk in life and determining what my values were, I feel like was very much something that um, I embraced, and I always feel like I never was succumb to peer pressure. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and one of the things that I always felt when I was younger, especially as I got towards high school and college, was the concept of knowing what I wanted to do in life. Right?
Yeah.
I felt so passionate at that point in time of my life where people would ask, like, "Oh, what do you want to go to school for?" Or,
Mm-hmm.
what do you want to study? Or what are you going to do after you graduate? And I always had an answer for those things. And then I would always hear,
Yeah.
excuse me, I would always hear people respond saying, like, I don't know, I need time to think about it, or I might take a year off, or just different things of that
No, you're fine.
nature. And that would always be so like wild or confusing to me. And I would almost like really and truly like judge people when they responded in that way, because it's like, are you not thinking about your life? Are you not thinking ahead? Like, are you just living in the moment? Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Until um, one day I was on a trip with the YMCA. I was involved with the YMCA Professional Studies Club at Springfield College, which
Yep.
was just like any other club out of school, but it was based around preparing young people to go into the Y world in the workforce and be ready for one of those positions as a coordinator or a director or whatever the title may be upon graduation. Which for people who don't know, Springfield College in Massachusetts formerly was the YMCA training school. So when it started out in its foundation, that's what its original purpose was, to prepare young adults to then go out and be in the workforce for YMCA's in the region, right? So I was a part of that club
Well,
while I was
history. Yeah.
there, and I wasn't involved my first time around at Springfield College. But when I returned, I got that car and I returned. Um, the people that supported me at the
Yeah.
school made sure I got involved in this program because they're like, look, we know what path you want to be on, and we see the qualities that you have, and so you're going to do this. And so on one of my trips, I'm somebody who sometimes can be an introvert or kind of shy, and out
Hmm.
in public, I may not necessarily engage with everybody, but I ended up on a plane, and on that plane ride, I ended up having a conversation with the guy sitting next to me. And just very organically and genuinely, we just struck up a conversation talking about life, what I'm doing, what do I aspire to do. And at this point in time, I wasn't very strong in faith or religion, right? Um, and when he spoke to me,
Yep.
he said, you know what? Um, God laughs at you every time you tell him what your plan is. And so that's one thing that has
Hmm.
stuck with me
I've
since
heard that
that
before.
moment because it
Yeah.
was like, man, I used to always think I had it figured out, right? I used to always be so stubborn and headstrong
Hmm.
and be like, yeah, I know what's going to happen with my life. I know, and shame on you for not knowing, right? And when I got to this crossroads point in my life where it was a pivotal moment, right? I was graduated high school, I got into college, got my associate's degree at a
We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're gonna make sure that you guys get a seamless podcast. So, Lau, could you just pick up where you left off, possibly?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I had been on my journey and had been through a tough time away from school and working my way back in, and this random man who I encounter, he speaks, some divine words, and that really changed how I saw my view
Hmm.
on just having a plan for life and kind of like judging others or feeling like you have to have everything figured out or that everything needs to be a straight path because really and truly on our journeys we may get off path and we may get back on the road or we may step into the next lane over and shift gears and then come back. And
Hmm.
so that was very indicative of my career. And I feel like to that point, I had been humbled in life, right? And
Yeah.
so that's something that I would say in my younger years that maybe I had as a value or a belief that definitely shifted as I got a little bit older and more experienced. Um, and now I definitely kind of keep that in perspective as I move daily throughout life and as I work through young people and
Hmm.
teach them lessons in life and how to move. So yeah, that's definitely something that has shifted my thoughts or beliefs over the years.
Yeah, no, that's definitely good to hear. I know, especially past 2020, a lot of things in life, a lot of things happen unexpected. The world that we're growing in right now, we didn't really expect it when we was in, like, say, even like in 2014. We couldn't expect what was going to happen in 2020. We couldn't expect TikTok. We couldn't expect, even just the interview podcasting, like going this way. We never expected any of this to work out in the way. People working from home, and so it's actually funny that you had said that, because even in my own life, how I describe how how resolute I was about, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna go to school, go right into acting, go right to LA, do all these different things, and it's God just laughs at those plans, because he, whether he or she, whatever they people want to call him, those plans, those bigger plans, we don't know how we fit, or how we're part of the puzzle piece, or how we could be inspiring somebody in our daily lives, or doing something that could be unexpected. Unexpected things happen all the time, and so I can definitely
Yeah.
empathize with that and what's going on. But I also want to get into what you're doing in your own personal life. Could you what does this is the first time I'm bringing it up, but what does ready prep mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, long story short, I think I've touched on it before. Um, but a lot of the things that I do now are really a cause and effect of me having positive role models and throughout my younger years, right?
Hmm.
And so one of the programs that I was a part of as a young person that originated at the Roxbury YMCA was the No Books, No Ball basketball program that was
Mm-hmm.
very popular in Boston. Over 30 years of service in the community, and I had some tremendous mentors through that program, and that was something where I was provided instruction, right? I was given life skills, um, and I was able to build relationships, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that was beyond basketball, right? And
Yep.
so being able to get that and support, and again, the no books, no ball piece, the no, if you're not on top of your grades and your schoolwork, there will be some conversations and some
Mm-hmm.
consequences, right? And so being able to have a program like that in my life, and that was one of the first programs I participated in. My first organized sport ever was playing in the youth baseball league that was organized out of the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club, and we played all of our games at Malcolm X, Washington Park. Being a part of some of those teams, like I was able through the years to have some tremendous mentors and tremendous experiences through youth sports that were kind of a catalyst to just my why, right? That when I
Yep.
became of age to pursue a college career, a college degree and study, or to pursue jobs out in the work world, a lot of those responsibilities were, hey, I'm going to try to run a sports program, or I want to assist in this capacity, right? And so a lot of those things, even when I became a YMCA director for youth sports and teen programs at the
Yep.
Menino YMCA in Hyde Park in Boston, um, I was in that role for 4 years, um, overseeing sports and teen programs. And that's really where I started to hone in on skills that it required for being a director for sports programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even there, I know you asked me about some of those skills of being a board member. That's where I got my first taste of what it means to fundraise, right? That's where I really started to
Yep.
get my foot in as far as like making schedules and coordinating referees and ordering uniforms and equipment and doing registrations and things of that nature. And
Mm-hmm.
so I built a lot of experiences there that ultimately I had got to a point where it's like, I didn't necessarily envision going off on my own, but through the years, I would have various parents due to numerous reasons, right? I had been a part time coach at one Y, and then I had been a full time director at another Y. And due to various reasons of having to do things the Y way,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a parent would say, "Hey, coach, we would love it if you ever one day just decided to do your own thing. We would support you."
Gotcha.
Right. And so the beauty in that is engaging with those young people and their families and building those relationships and doing things the right way, or doing things to a certain standard, positive coaching, role modeling. I had that support, and there were parents that planted the seeds that said, if one day, coach, if you
Yep.
ever do your own thing, we'll support you. And we're going to bring our kids to be involved. And that's exactly what happened. And so, working full time, pandemic happens,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was kind of a blessing and a curse. I mean, I don't want to downplay the impacts of the pandemic on a lot of people because it impacted a lot of people's lives negatively. But for me personally, um, Ready Prep came from that turning point in my life and my career where
Yep.
it was like, hey, I want to continue to do what I've been doing. This global pandemic has altered my life and my career.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that I'm now capable of going off on my own and still offering programs, activities, support, resources, and with the help of these families, with these children, and in the community. And so that's how it came about. And at some point in my fixated brain, I was very stuck on acronyms. And so you see all these
Yep.
companies and they have these names and they're very intentional, right? And so READY actually
Very.
stands
Yeah.
for Recreational Enrichment and Development for Youth. Um, and so I
Yeah.
believe really and truly in
Did you come up with
recreational
that, or
enrichment
did
and
you help
development
hack
for
with
youth.
that?
Say that again.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, did you come up with that? Was that like a collaborative effort? How did
Oh
how did
no,
y'all come
hundred
upon the
percent.
name of that?
Trial and error, trial and error. Honestly, there was when I
Yep.
was a director for the Y. I had a similar concept, but on a smaller scale, and it was more on how to grow like
Mm,
intramurals basketball programs. Because when I was at my Y, I inherited a small amount of kids. I think there were 30 total kids in my basketball
gotcha.
program when I started in May of 2016. And then by that fall, I want to say there were about 60 kids by the end of the summer, beginning of fall. And then by the next season, I had 90 kids. And then by the time I had left the Y in that sports director role, there were about 150 or so kids in my basketball programs in that small High Park YMCA gym, right? Um,
Yeah,
and
that's a lot.
so,
Yeah, I know how
um,
small it is over there.
yeah, yeah. Um, man, I just lost my train of thought. I apologize.
That's my
So
fault.
yeah,
I cut you off.
in order, no, it's fine. In order to build up those programs, one of the things that I found, because people would always ask me, like, "Hey, we got a new director over here. Do you mind kind of showing them the ropes or explaining them what you do and how you
Hmm.
do it, so that they can grow programs over here?" And so one of the things that I realized was that, like, people start with small groups of kids and they do skills and drills, right? And then the kids always
Yep.
want to play some form of scrimmage or game, but if you don't have numbers to do that, then what are you supposed to do? And so it's like everybody wants to have like an in-house league, because around the country or just in communities, it's like, hey, yeah, preschool basketball or second grade soccer or whatever the case may be. And so one of the things I realized was like, hey, I have these numbers, but not every Y has these numbers. We're supposed to be working together because we're a whole association of 13 branches.
Yeah.
So, what can we do for those YMCAs that may only have 10 to 15 kids while I over here have over 100? It's like maybe we can
Hmm.
coordinate group events and jamborees, so to speak, and we can have programs where, I don't want to call them AAU or travel basketball, but really and truly, it's like group community events where it's like, hey, I can bring my kids, you can bring your kids, our families can all have a day of festivities, and this is how we're going to grow our programs organically, right? And so when I was
Yes.
developing this model, I had to find a name for it. And so that kind of phase of trying to figure out cool creative names, and the YMCA is very much hung up on acronyms,
Yeah.
if anybody couldn't
Themselves.
tell, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of led me also into uh, creating ready or recreational enrichment and development for youth. And prep, it's kind of redundant, but it's really, I like to think that a lot of my programs are preparatory, right?
Yep.
I have always prided myself in teaching the fundamentals, the technique, the mechanics of the sport or the activity, especially to beginners, right?
Yep.
Beginners or just kids at younger ages. And so, with that mindset of that being my purpose, I'm preparing kids for life, preparing kids for the next level. If they want to go off to middle school or high school ball or whatever the case may be. So, Ready Prep, now Ready Prep Inc., is really and truly a local preparatory program where we're instilling values and teaching fundamentals of various sports to kids in the community.
Hmm. Nice. That's really commendable of you because we don't have a lot of that in Boston. Even just your mentioning of because we have it's all under YMCA of Greater Boston basically, and so with the whether it's Menino, Dorchester, Roxbury, they're all great programs, but also we all have such small buildings. It's not necessarily the same as YMCA's that are outside of the city that have just more blockage. Just if we're being honest, just more blockage on the block. Boston's very compact. Boston's a very it's a medium sized city, but in terms of like parking, spacing, and zoning, we don't necessarily get all of those resources. And so you reaching out to those communities is like definitely it's a trailblazer. I remember even how important No Books No Ball was to a lot of my friends and people that were in the city. And so whether it's different and it's fresh, and so you spearheading that is really good to hear. um you've been really gracious with your time. I want to make sure that to get the off these last couple questions, I want to make sure that we get into your
I'm here for it.
into like
Shoot
your
them off. Come on.
how do I describe it? Yeah, I'll just go right into it. Basically, the question I have for you is, how do you balance, because you do have multiple successful teams. How do you balance building a competitive nature within the children, and also having them be mindful about the people around them, and building camaraderie. How do you create that balance, if whether it's in practice or whether it's I'll give you an example from my life. When I'm in a swim meet, or say I work with the kids in swimming, I always tell them, the people, as soon as you finish a race, I want you to look to your left, I want you to look to your right, and I want you to shake the person that you just raced against. You don't know what kind of day they're having, you don't know what kind of race they're having, and even if you were to beat them, even if you were to lose to them, always shake their hands. And so that's one way of me trying to make sure that they build that camaraderie even with people who aren't on the same team with them. So, in your aspect, how do you build like a competitive nature, but also building like a collaborative nature with people who are in the team or outside the team?
That's a great question. I think that's a question that, like, when I was with the YMCA, they always struggle with is like, how do we work on these developmental programs and say youth development first, and then also address this competitive nature of youth sports that's there? How do we blend the two, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the other things that kind of stuck out to me through the years is at some point, you know, I was coaching and kids would go through handshaking lines and they would just say GG, GG, GG. Like, what in the world is a GG? Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're just abbreviating good game, right? But like, what is behind that good
Literally,
game?
yeah.
Like, are you just saying it just to say it, or are you saying it because you mean it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
with this particular 8U team that we have for Mattapan Patriots, I'm really proud. And everybody has group chats nowadays, right? That's where technology is at. That's where
Yep.
phones are at. We have a
100%.
coaches
Yeah.
group chat, and one of the things that we talk about periodically is like we had a 7 game regular season, and I want to say maybe 4 times, 4 or 5 times throughout the season, referees or families would come up to us. And mind you, we were 7-0. And some teams we were beating 32-0, 41-0, 22-0.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we got to a certain we got through the season, and almost every game a family from the other team would come up to us, or a referee would come up to us, or the opposing coach would come up and say like, hey, you guys were amazing, so gracious, the sportsmanship was there, the respect is there, you guys fight hard but you guys don't fight dirty, there was no ounce of cheating, like you guys your coaches were shouting instructions and not were not negative and demeaning to the
Mm-hmm.
kids, and you were very supporting and uplifting, and your families, they were so kind and supportive, and it was just a great environment, and you guys work hard and you guys do the right thing, right? um, and that's always great to get that feedback, right? Because it's one thing to say like, oh, tell someone they're a great coach, right?
Yep.
But when you compliment the culture and the environment that you've had a hand in creating, like we talk about it
Mm-hmm.
being a
That's
village, but really and
up there.
truly I do feel like this is my third year with this group of kids, and we have 25 kids on the team this year. 12 of them have been with me for the last 3 years consecutively. And
Mm-hmm.
so, since they were 5 and 6 years old. And so these families have been around. So that core of just really and truly being able to kind of instill values or form values together, it really starts from the beginning. And I'd be lying in saying that a lot of those values from the first year are still here from this year. I think we've had to build along the way. Um, and it's a blessing that we have mentors on our coaching staff and teachers that they're very intentional. And I say that because we have a Coach Bourne, um, a great brother. He during the preseason, every week we would have a word of the week, right? And that was one of the things that
Got you.
contributed to our
Nice.
kids learning certain traits, right? So one week it was communication, the next week it was effort, the next week it was respect, the next week, there were just different
Mm-hmm.
elements and qualities that we would learn and teach the kids and emphasize. And so those things carried throughout the season. Um, and so as we kind of had this model of one step of the way, one level at a time, we're going to get to our goals by just doing our job every single day. It got to a point
Yep.
where towards the end of our season, we're in the middle of the playoffs, and the kids were bought in, right? They understood that the up downs and the push ups and the sprints and the laps and the hill and pushing the sled, those things were not punitive.
Yep.
They just got to a point where they understood values. They said, "Coach, focus and discipline. That's one thing." They said, um, "Hard work, putting in the work. That's another thing. Communication is another thing." And so they got to a certain point where and it's funny because yes, we have captains because what team doesn't have captains, right? But it's like still, it's
Yep.
like
Mm-hmm.
you have one 8-year-old leading another 8-year-old, right? And so it's like as a coach, we're just like um, we're instilling this in everyone, and it gets to a point where it's kind of like it's unconscious. We ask them, and just like every sports team has their chants or their phrases or sayings, like it we drill things into them so much that it just becomes the norm. And so by outlining
Yep.
those expectations and responsibilities and the culture that we want at the beginning of the season and getting that buy-in, the buy-in from the parents is huge, and
Yep.
then getting the kids over time, even if they're a little resistant or if they have a long way to learn, from July 24th, we were no means the same team as we were on November 12th, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, but you know, I don't know if you saw, but there was a team that we played this year, Charlton Dudley Rams. They're based out of Charlton, Massachusetts. Um, and
Okay.
and it was all over the news that one of their 8-year-olds, he in the middle of the season was diagnosed with cancer. Um,
Got it.
and it hasn't been confirmed yet. We've been trying to watch film and all types of things, but we believe that he played in the game that we played them the week before he was diagnosed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we had a hard fought game with them in the mud. Yes, we ended up winning, but that was one of those teams that really commended us. The coaching staff was like, "How do you guys do it? How do you control them? How do you get them
Mm.
focused and so disciplined? And they listen, and you guys are amazing. Your families are." That was one of those programs. Even though, like you said, on the competitive side, it was just a lopsided victory. But it's like
Different. Yeah.
they were never disrespectful. They were never
Mm-hmm.
showboating, standing over anybody with their muscles showing and all that other stuff, or screaming or taunting. Like there was
Yeah.
none of that, right? And so when we learned of the news of the tragedy of really and truly what that family is dealing with, finding out that this young child is diagnosed with cancer, we actually sent them a video. We recorded a video and sent them a message because and we posted their GoFundMe on our social media platforms because, man, that's a tough thing to deal with, right? And I didn't mention
Mm-hmm.
this earlier, but we actually had two of our parents pass away during the season. One back in
Nice.
August, one of the fathers passed away, and
Mm-hmm.
then later in the fall, one of the moms passed away. And so there are a lot of things that have emotionally kept us together,
Yeah.
right? And we've had to support each other and be that village. And I think when you have that tight knit community and you have those values of caring for others and
Mm-hmm.
respecting others, um, I think that's kind of how you fight through any type of stigmas or over competitiveness,
Yeah.
where it's like it takes away from today's world of youth sports, because we see the nasty sides of youth sports nowadays with the fights between parents or refs or
Parents. Yeah.
coaches or things that
Refs.
happen in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've been able to stay out of that because just the culture we've built, being
Mm-hmm.
a positive example.
No, that's definitely good to hear. It sounds like you guys were working, especially with the like words of the week and just instilling, keeping those and building from there, as opposed to laying out. Okay, everybody has to do this. Everybody has to do 1, 2, and 3. Even though everybody has their job, it seems like it's something that you guys are very conscious about building and making sure that whether it's as simple as a word, even just having effort. Effort be a word for the week, and somebody having that constantly in their mind. I'm sure it made a difference for a lot of those kids. Um, this is my last question for you. You've been really gracious with your time, Lyle. Thank you so much so far. Hopefully, maybe we get a part two, because I do see you going forward some more, especially with this team and other teams. I know we're gonna take this podcast outside my bedroom, so we're gonna be making some more moves. And I'm curious about, reflecting on your journey. What do you feel like are some skills, or what do you feel like are some um what are some what are some things that we, whether you, as a coach, as a person, as a whether an uncle, brother, what do you feel like what are some things we should aspire to build more collaboration with people, or build more communion with other people? Because as a coach, that's kind of your job. You're fostering the growth of these kids. You're fostering the growth of the other um, um, the other staff, and even the parents too. The parents are getting involved into a new community that they, whether with knowledge or without knowledge, they're coming into it. But yeah, what do you feel like are some things that we should aspire to, or some things, advice that you would give to, say, a parent or somebody who wants to get into coaching?
Yeah. So before I answer that, what I will say is, as you continue on your road, I'm in this new role as a regional athletic coordinator for Boston Public Schools. So as you continue on this road, and as I'm in this new role, the next time we connect, I'm hoping that I have some more
Mm-hmm.
experiences that we can talk about that hopefully can inspire some people, or kind of shed light on real life experiences that people can empathize with, right? But to answer your
Yeah.
question, um, I think a lot of times, um, and this kind of ties into one of your earlier questions. A lot of times, the mentality or attitude of knowing it all gets in the way of of growth and experiences,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, like sometimes when it comes to collaboration in the community, sometimes it's ego, right? Sometimes it's ego, or sometimes it is wanting, to have a certain level of fame or credit for
Mm-hmm.
something. And a quote that I was told recently was, "It's not about who's right; it's about what's right." Right?
Mm.
And
Yep.
another thing that I'll say, as far as like you asked about parents, um, uh, we hear about this phenomenon called burnout, where from my studies and
Yep.
my learning, kids by the age of 10, they will quit a sport. Doesn't matter how good they were at it. If they fall out of love
Yep.
with it just based off of over usage, just, you look at some of these sports nowadays in these facilities, you can play basketball, baseball, softball, track, football, you name it, year round, right? And so it's like kids do get burnt out. As much as we want to keep them active and fight things like obesity, or just being inactive due to being so active on electronic devices and screen time, like sometimes we gotta kind of slow down and let kids just be kids. And one of the parts to that is, a parent's role in youth sport and
I
supporting
like
their
that.
child really should be signing them up and encouraging them, right? And being able
Mm-hmm.
to support their emotions as they deal with the wins, as they deal with the losses, as they deal with being the star player, as they deal with being the kid who barely gets off the bench. And so, if a kid has a negative experience on a team, does that necessarily warrant jumping to another team, right? Or,
Yep.
the fixation or fascination with being on a super team, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to bring my kid to
Mm.
the best team because winning is the end all be all, right? And then,
Yep.
on the back end is wondering why I brought my kid to the super team and they didn't really get taught anything, and the team may have or didn't win. And if they did win, it's like, okay, my kid, didn't learn anything, really didn't benefit from this. Did I make the
Yep.
right decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of times we have to support each other. We have to understand each other. We have to take the time to listen, empathize. And if you really and truly have the best interests of children or the community, um, a lot of times it's working together, collaborating, sharing of resources, and not to be funny about it, but I feel like that's what we've cultivated with the Mattapan Patriots
Mhm.
youth football and cheerleading organization, right?
Yes,
I
it's
think
okay to brag
we
about it.
led the
Yeah.
cast today. We led the cast today talking about that, and I think that's it's really and truly where we are. We've grown our board, we've grown our community, we've taken monumental steps to shift from Pop Warner to AYF, and I think what we're doing as far as fostering
Hmm.
our communities, like really and truly, as we want to impact so many children's lives and impact the community, but we also want to maintain the culture and environment that we've created, right? And so we don't want to be exclusive, but what we're doing might not be for everybody, right? And so we
100%.
want to
Mhm.
make sure that our best interests align with the kids' best interests and the community's best interests, and how we feel like we will operate for the best interests of those. Um, and so, yeah, just being conscious of those things and being positive and collaborating. I think that's at the forefront of anybody that wants to get involved in the youth sports scene,
Yep.
or become a coach, or be a sports parent, you name it. Yeah.
Amazing. That's really amazing to hear. Before we head out, is there anything you want to leave the audience with that I might not have asked, or anything that you feel like is on your heart that you want to make sure that people know about?
Again, we have this 14U squad that's going down. We have 27 boys, one girl. They've worked hard all season long. Mattapan Patriots 14U. We do everything from football to cheer to dance. And we're really looking to have as much impact as possible on our community. And this year is our first year in AYF, so it's a blessing to be able to have these teenagers qualify for the national level, for the
Hmm.
national championships, because I think it's really going to bring our awareness to the work that we're doing in the community. So for anybody, oh, I apologize, man. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're fine.
Okay, my earbuds just cut out, but here we go. But yeah, so for anybody who wants to support us, please, we do have a GoFundMe campaign. We do have our social media platforms. If you've seen us on Channel 7 News, or even Devin McCourty gave us a shout out, there's a lot of people showing love nowadays. But really and truly, we want to push as much as we can so that these young people have the best experience December 2nd through December 9th in Florida for the Nationals, and hopefully they could bring home the title.
Yes. Let's hope for the title,
That's
man.
something to talk about next time we sit down.
Yeah, that'd be great. 100%. Um, Lyle Jackson, coach, BPS sports coordinator, um, one of the creators for Ready Up, much more. Lyle Jackson, I really do appreciate you not only being a mentor and a coach to me, but I appreciate your time, appreciate the work you're putting into this youth program. I'm not sure if you knew or if I told you, but I was also a Mattapan Patriot back in 2002. Super, yeah, a long time ago. But yeah, thanks again, man. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I know that you came from Mattapan Patriots, and you're lucky that we didn't have enough time today for me to talk about my experience being your coach, because that's a whole different segment. We're gonna need some more time for that. But I appreciate you having me.
for sure,
I
yeah.
appreciate you having me. I'm grateful for the time that you've allowed for me to speak on everything I'm involved with in the community. And I wish you the best with this. Like you said, it's on the up and up, and it's going to only grow from here. So hopefully you can take some gems for me from today, and anybody else that this is able to impact. And I look forward to connecting again in the future. I really appreciate you.
No doubt. Thank you once again. You heard it here. Go ahead, and if you already know the links in the bio are gonna show the GoFundMe for the 14U football team. So make sure to do that as soon as possible. We're gonna get this podcast out as soon as possible. Um, thank you guys for subscribing to the Share the Road podcast. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. We're gonna be on YouTube,
Yes,
TikTok,
do that.
Instagram, and any other platforms that you watch your podcasts on. So yes. Thanks once again, Lyle. I hope you have a great day, man.
All right, take care.
No doubt, man. All right.